Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for the invite today. As has been said, I am an industrial engineer in theory. It's what I studied, and I suppose like most engineers, we sadly don't end up doing engineering. But we take a lot of what we learn from an engineering approach and we apply it to everything we do. And as an engineer, everything is a project, and there's always these projects ongoing. What I want to do today is to share my 3-year project, which comes to an end in October this year. That will mark 3 years of being CEO, and the journey that I have taken almost on one large project or a number of projects, and kind of the journey we've taken along the way. Day one of the job in October 2016. What would you do if you were appointed the CEO of a financial services group? Run, panic. You must realize when there's a change in CEO, there's often politics that are going on at that time. There's often a lack of direction because the outgoing CEO is actually allowing some new reins. He's allowing for a change in direction. And you arrive on day one with this lack of direction, with this politics at play, with other people who are vying for the job, with new areas of responsibility, because prior to that there were other people who were responsible. I was Chief Information Officer, so marketing, sales, finance, legal, governance, compliance, those are all new areas for me. I'd worked on them perhaps in the 18 years prior, but certainly they were not reporting to me at that time. And so you're not given a specific formula, you're not given direction, you really are told, go and do what needs to get done. What's more, you are expected to put this 3 or 5 year plan in place, and suddenly you've got these new areas where you almost feel blind. The information that you get is the type of information you'd get in a boardroom. 2 months old, slightly irrelevant, definitely doesn't line up because the sales guys will give you one number and the finance guys give you another number, and everyone is giving you different numbers. They just don't cost board pack to board pack. And you're expected now to take this information and to put together a strategy. And then that strategy, in my view, often gets stuck maybe at your exco layer. It certainly doesn't go much further than that. If you're to walk into many organizations and ask them, what is your strategy? A lot of people on the ground who are supposed to be executing won't know what that is. I think not only is information old and irrelevant, but the world is changing so incredibly quickly now that to try and put together a 3 or 5 or 10 year view is incredibly difficult. So if we stop and we think about October 2016, and me putting my 3-year view, which, as I say, the 3 years is up in October. I'm not leaving, by the way. It's just that is 3 years. Well, I haven't been told I'm leaving. Not the best of my knowledge. But think of the change that has taken place. And it's something at FedGroup we try to embrace because we recognize the change is coming so quickly. So I want to share with you a short video that we actually allowed people to see last year around the change that happened in the first year and a bit of my role as CEO. So that essentially is, in under a year and a bit of myself being CEO, the types of changes that were happening in the world. And of course, the changes we're seeing haven't slowed down. If we look at the political landscape around the world, there's certainly lots to talk about, almost on a daily basis. I did a talk 3 weeks ago, and just before I went up, I was watching the rand, and I was thinking, I wonder if this is going to break 15 rand. We were at 14 rand something, maybe it's about 5 weeks ago. And I did the talk in Joburg, and 4 days later I did the talk in Cape Town. But between that time, we broke from 14 rand something to 15 rand something, going to 15 rand 30 in under 4 days. And this morning, as I was going here, as I always do before speaking, I always go and look at what's happened in the last few hours, just in case something significant has happened. And of course, we've broken 15 back today. So it is just absolutely crazy how quickly things are changing, but also how little of it is in our control. Regardless of your political affinity, the political stage everywhere is interesting and unpredictable and changing really, really fast. What we're seeing too is that countries are fighting corporations, and that line between a country and a corporation is almost becoming difficult to distinguish. Is this America fighting a company, or China fighting America? It's almost impossible to tell. And what is absolutely certain, and I love this little proverb here, when elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. So we have our elephants here fighting, and one could argue that Africa, South Africa, emerging markets are the grass. There can be no doubt that we are affected by what's happening in the rest of the world. If we come a little bit closer to home, we see that things are changing too. For many people, there was hope only a couple of months ago. But we know that it's not a simple picture. It's not one person who gets to say what goes on. And as we watch the political story unfold, not daily, hourly, it's incredible to see. And we know that things have changed so much, we know that we're going for growth. I love this poster. Let's grow South Africa together. And there can be no doubt that we want to grow this country. But sometimes we wonder whether we have the horsepower to push through. And so, take that first video, plus a couple of the slides I've shown you in 30 seconds or so, and tell me what strategy you would have put in place in October 2016 that would have taken into account these changes. So we talk about scope creep. It's impossible to come up with 5, 10-year projects with the level of certainty that we want. I am CEO of FedGroup, but I also I get startups going. I've got a number of startups. One of them is a solar install business, and you'll see where that fits in. But you cannot even pin the rand. Think of a change in rand like we've seen, what that does to a solar install business we're importing. And of course you can hedge, but you hedge wrong, then your competitors are cheaper than you, etc. So we live in this very fast-changing world, and we have to build projects in all of this uncertainty. I've said that I love technology. Technology for me not only allows us to manage the change, but drives much the change. But we need to realize too that it's not just technology, it's not just the broader landscape, but it's things like regulation, competitors, consumers that are driving this change so incredibly quickly. I was sitting in a board meeting the other day, and one of the non-exec directors asked of the company secretary, she said, won't you please give us a list of the pieces of regulation that affect me as a non-exec director? And then a printout of that so that in the next board pack guys could go through it. And now on a regular basis, just the changes that we need to know. 3 pages was the index listing the pieces of regulation. We had over 900 pages of regulation alone as a summary of the piece of regulation that we have to adhere to as the major piece of regulation. That's not taking into account the other bits and pieces that affect us all. And so in the financial services space, if it's RDR or Twin Peaks or Kofi or Popey or Poppy, you name it, the regulation changes almost daily. We run a life insurance company. We have done so for the last 9 years. The regulation has changed. We have to reapply for our license. The license that we've applied for no longer counts. And so that's the uncertainty that we have to run our business with. We can be told by a regulator tomorrow, sorry, that license just doesn't count anymore. If we look at competitors, I love the banking industry. It's an industry that you just look at and think that will never change. And yet at the moment, we've got 3 competitors who've basically entered this market this year alone. What for me is one of the most interesting things is when I speak to any of my banking friends in the big 4 banks. I don't like the 5th bank, so there's 4 big banks as far as I'm concerned. But if you speak to any of my friends who work at any of the top 4 or 5 banks, all of them, when describing the new entrants, describe it roughly like this. Oh yeah, it's interesting what they're doing, but it won't really affect us because we're in this segment or because we're this or we're that. The arrogance of these large, big incumbents who just don't see what's happening. It's incredibly scary. But forget, in the financial services space, financial services players. What about retailers? What about telecommunications companies? All going for the same piece of that wallet. All wanting to change the rules on which we play. And then, of course, there's fintech, where a garage-type company tomorrow could be your largest competitor. There's cryptocurrency, Facebook with their cryptocurrency play, etc., etc. From a consumer point of view, never has the consumer demanded so much. Never has the consumer been as aware. We deal with massive platform players, your Facebooks, your Googles, your Airbnbs, you name it. Consumers have for a long time given their information for free. But even that is changing now. People are a little bit more aware of the digital crumbs that they're dropping and what it means. I play with a lot of technology, and just the other day we were playing around with a smartphone, a photo of my thumbprint. Within a second, we have every credit transaction, full access to your banking details, you name it. Every digital footprint that you've ever done, from a fingerprint, a photo of a fingerprint. Legally. These are all using available, nicely linked together, all available services. So we're living in a very different world. The expectations are changing, and never has there been such a demand for instant gratification. I think the point is not what the change is, but in the context of what you are learning about today, it's how do you build these, I'm not quite sure what methodology you guys have used, Prince, PMBOK, Agile, you name it, all the different things, assume some level of something at the end. My real life experience has been that it's just so difficult to get that. And so I'd like to tell you how we do it or how we did it in terms of the projects that we've done. I think before we go into what we did and whether it was a success or not, I'm going to give 2 measures of which I think count towards our success. And you'll see that 2 of the things that we wanted to understand was, first of all, we wanted growth in our business. We wanted to grow our business. In the last 18 months, we've brought in more sales than we brought in the first 25 years of our business. So in terms of rapid growth, I think when we first met, I told you this is what we were trying to do. That's one measure of success. The other one was that we We're not a simple business anymore. FedGroup is roughly 40 businesses underneath there. Each one needs its own license, its own little space, and what have you. When I want to know our cash flow for our money, not our clients' money, it's 160 bank accounts. Now try and manage that type of complexity. And the money you got in your bank account is not your available cash, because you've got all sorts of regulatory limits, etc., etc. So we run in a very complex environment, and we wanted to understand, as a second part of it, what does this business look like? Not 2 months ago, not 3 months ago with old, unreliable information. And a measure of success is that every 15 minutes, we know every major metric in our business, every one of them, every 15 minutes. So I've got a 15-minute view of my business. At the end of this presentation, I'll show you a snapshot of our business that was taken an hour before this presentation, just pasted in there. So that's two of the things that we did succeed in, in terms of putting this all together. I think the first part is that it can sometimes look easy. What we have done is based on 14 years worth of work. So as much as the last 3 years I've put together and pulled things together, we decided 14 years ago to build our own in-house system. It's something that it's a very difficult choice to make. It's expensive, it's complex, it requires a very committed team. But it's one of the reasons in which we can build on that in such a customized way as and when we wish. It's called As You Write, and you'll see me referring to it quite a lot. Custom built, custom code, totally in-house. And that is the basis on which we built many of our projects. I'm going to give you a summarized video that shows you As You Write and its reach. I think just before I do, we will focus a lot on some tools that we use to get things done, a lot on the system, but ultimately it's about people. Before anything else, it's about people. So we'll dig into that a little bit, because it doesn't matter what methodology you're using. A deadline is a deadline, but passive-aggressive people can be very passive and very aggressive at just not delivering. And unless you've got buy-in, it doesn't matter how you're measuring, they can literally block everything. We'll share with you some of our processes as well. So what we do through As You Write is we bring people, processes, and systems together, and I'll give you a quick little show of how that little system comes together. So As You Write is the system that we have built in-house, as I say, and it doesn't matter what interaction you have with FedGroup. It literally, any interaction on any single product is on a single system. Doesn't matter if you're using our mobile app, doesn't matter if you're using the thick-end client, doesn't matter if it's an IoT device in the field, doesn't matter if it's our machine learning algorithms. It's a single platform that literally looks after all of that. And all of these words you see up here are ultimately not subsystems. It is a single system, but it is all the bits of functionality that are built into the system over the last 14 years. And you'll see that the functionality is very broad. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you just a little bit of information on 4 parts of it, which is how we visualize our data. So of all the modules, we want to be able to have business intelligence reporting. We have a Microsoft BI on top of our full database, giving us daily information drilled down to member level. We have dashboarding, which is updated every 15 minutes and shows us every major metric in our business. Our client reporting is glossy, but generated straight off the system, so that you've got an up-to-date warts and all what's going on. And then finally, we've gamified our entire environment, and I'll go through some of that, which gives a really good real-time loop into everything from client accounts to projects to software development, you name it. Everything is gamified, and we know exactly what's going on at any time. And I'll go into some of that. This game, by the way, has been built from the ground up, and all the technology you see here is custom built. Got a vending machine, we'll go into that a little bit as well. So we've tied in the physical world to the game as well. So we can actually tie things in terms of rewards and the like straight into there. So that's a quick summary of where we're going over the next hour or so in terms of how we got there and got this all right. But before we do, there's that whole, I think it's Simon Sinek, it's got that onion. And he says if you go to people and say, what does your business do? Most people can answer it. We're in telecommunications, we're in financial services, you name it. If you go and say, how do you do it? People have to scratch their head a little bit more and think a little bit more about it. But when you ask why, so many businesses get totally unstuck. The picture here is of a call box. We run one of our products, it's called Beneficiary Funds, and it describes our why. The why is because a phone call that is dropped could be a 3-kilometer walk, it could be a lost coin, or it could be a medical emergency. There are real people using financial services. And yet somehow the industry seems to have forgotten this almost entirely. This next video is of a girl who lost her mother or father. And if you've got a pension fund and mom or dad dies, that pension fund money gets paid into what's called a beneficiary fund. One of our products is a beneficiary fund. We run a beneficiary fund. And at age 18, we pay out that money to the beneficiary. But before then, we pay their schooling, etc. We launched a program 8 years ago. And what we've done now is at age 18, anyone who's been to this program is now offered the opportunity to come for a job interview on the reports that they've gotten through us. And then, if they are good enough, they come and they work for us for a year and get a 1-year diploma. So at the end of a year, instead of being matric with either mom or dad missing, you now have a year of work experience, what have you. And that you will see a real person who is now a full-time employee. By the way, you'll see it somewhere in one of the videos later. 10% of our workforce now has come through this program.
17 years ago, our house got burned down, and my father sustained bad injuries.
This cable's faulty.
He didn't receive treatment at the public hospital, which led to his involvement. My father had my sisters and I, and my mom had to work because it was closer to her work. Going back to 17, 18 years ago when our house burned down, my mom wasn't in our loft job. It was just a small job, so she had to take care of 3 girls as the breadwinner had got, and my father had a provident fund. The company that he worked for selected FedGroup to administer those funds, and since then FedGroup has been our helping hand. When we were growing up, we didn't know about the funds. All we knew is that everything was covered. My mom would actually ask for a proof of admission if we go to the schools, and we'd give it to her, not knowing that it was going to come to FedGroup and FedGroup would pay for our school fees, pay for our uniform, and etc. Like, most of the time, I remember bringing letters home with banking details, but I wouldn't be sure what it was for. I'm pretty sure because there was, like, provident fund is not on if the money was paid out to her. Yes, she would have tried getting her lives back on track, but at the same time, I don't think she would have been thinking that they have to go to varsity one day. She has to pay for school fees, the best school fees. She would have just used the money to fix up what had to be done now and not think about our future, and that could have really impacted her life. When I was 18, in my matric year, they could call me and they asked if I was in matric and what are my plans after matric. And I told them that I had no plans actually, and they asked me if I was interested in the program, the 8-acre program that they were offering. They offered that in the program I get to get work experience, and I also get to get a qualification of a business administration. And they told me the process behind that, of which was that I had to draft a motivational letter, and the motivational letter had to state why must they choose me. why must I be given the opportunity and not the other learners? And after the motivation letter was drafted and they had made a selection, they called me in for an interview to see if is it really what I wrote or is it something else. And then from there, FedGroup decided to take me on board and take me through the learnership, and I worked very hard at the learnership and I got taken permanently. There's a whole lot of things that could have happened in our FedGroup. Thinking that there are children out there, if the money was paid into my account, I would probably bought a car or mismanaged the funds. I'd like to thank FedGroup for taking time and taking the decisions well-wise for my future, to better my future, and not letting me spend the money recklessly or my guardian, because my mother could have done anything else. She could have decided to buy a car, buy 2 houses, or whatever that suited her. But FedGroup saw that they're gonna manage the funds according to my needs. And secondly, giving me the opportunity through the FedGroup program. If it wasn't for the program, I would have been employed, probably working at a restaurant or something to make quick money. Yeah, I'd like to thank FedGroup for giving me the opportunity and giving me a stepping stone into my career. I've given myself an honoring. I'm age 21, and this is my story that I'd like to share with you.
And so we're on an advanced project management course. What does this have to do with that? It has everything to do with that. Because project management tools come and go, and methodologies improve and get worse, almost like a pendulum, too much spec, too little spec, etc., etc. While we're on, I don't know if you guys have ever read Eli Goldratt's The Goal. If you want to understand project management in a cheat course, go and read it. It's the best book on project management in a very novel type of way. Anyone can read it. It's the best book. Eli Goldratt's The Goal. But ultimately, it doesn't matter what tool you've got. If you don't have buy-in and you're not doing it for the right reasons, you're wasting your time. But let's get on to some specifics. How do we do it? October 2016, we work in 3 horizons. It's a Harvard business model: Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3. I don't know why they called them like that. It's weird. But anyway, Horizon 1, 70% of your resources. Horizon 2, 20%. Horizon 3, 10%. We tend to go a bit heavier. We try to go 50, 30, 20 type thing. So we try to push to be more futuristic in terms of what we do. The Horizon 1 stuff is the stuff we're doing right now. We know with absolute clarity what we're trying to do. Every day, every week, for the next month, 3 months. Horizon 2 is the stuff we're doing over the next 6 to 12 months, maybe 2 years at a push. Horizon 3 is where we're going in 10 years. We have specified those very articulately, with more detail, obviously, on the stuff that's happening right now, because we change even our product focus depending on what's happening to exchange rates or depending on market sentiment, etc., etc. Ask us where we're going in 5 years' time, we have no idea. We know where we want to be in 10 years' time, roughly speaking, but 5 years is absolutely impossible to know where we're going. So that's roughly what we do. We also take our long-term view in terms of some of the technology and landscape forces. Technology being one of my favorites. So we decided 3 years ago that we're interested in peer-to-peer IoT and machine learning as 3 emerging technologies that we thought we needed to be playing in. We specifically chose not to go into blockchain, not to say there are problems. Well, it is to say there's problems with it, but that's a longer debate which we don't need to go into right now. So we need to put the strategy in place to make sure that we bring in these new technologies, to make sure that we achieve what we want to do. We knew that we wanted to be able to move away from 2-month-old reports. We knew that we wanted to grow, and we knew it was important that our staff feel involved and buy into everything. We put together a 20-page strategy document, knowing no one would ever read it, not even the board, who always ask for it. And then we came up with an acronym, It stood for predictable measurements, involvement, and growth. That, largely speaking, is our 3-year strategy that we then started to roll out. In order to have predictable measurements, we need to put in some tools to help us understand things. As I said at the time, sales numbers did not line up with sales numbers out of finance, etc., etc. Having a strong system, we just started to define those rule sets really, really strictly, and only allowed one set of numbers to count, and allowed the internal fighting to sort out to make sure that one source is the only one that counted, and everyone had to make sure that was represented in those numbers. We then went about and put in some dashboards, and there's an example of what they look like. And you can see that there was a score showing how you're done with some key measurements. If you look at the dashboards, I've got more TVs than I have TV licenses. No, I didn't say that. I've got more TVs than we've got offices. We have literally TVs everywhere with these metrics showing us what's going on. We spoke about our 15-minute accuracy. We have got up-to-date numbers every 15 minutes on every key number. That's every debit, every credit, every unreconciled amount, every email, every fax, every asset management instruction. And if you ever come to offices, you can come and look at, and you will see them real-time, 15 minutes. We actually have real-time measurements, literally less than 1 second delays on all of our IoT type of stuff. So all the things that need real-time measurements, we have real-time numbers, and have obviously started to put them in non-relationship databases for technology reasons the like. But we put in dashboarding, every dashboard different, showing where you are, what's happening, what the numbers look like, where we're going, etc. Once we had that, it made making people get involved so much easier, because we could start to talk about real things that needed to get done with real-time loops as to how we're doing. It allowed us to get a lot more relaxed on certain things with absolute certainty in terms of what needed to be delivered. But once again, this is what ultimately matters. We had to get our values right, and not written, there we go, and not written on a board for everyone to see all the time, but just instilled in everything we do. Ultimately, we believe we hire adults who can make decisions. So almost our most important value is it's up to me. You can't sit there and you need to take it and sort it out. But what you'll see as well is almost a pulling apart or this natural tension between our values. So people first can be a soft culture, but get shit done is a hard culture. And so there is this interplay between the two. You can't get shit done without making sure that people are looked after. We even used the specific language to drive home the point. And those are our values that we instill in everything that we do. And once we had that, we did this.
In 2016, financial services company FedGroup ran an internal campaign to motivate staff. The CEO introduced Project PIG, which stands for Predictability, Involvement and Growth. Project PIG uses a bespoke algorithm to measure internal business targets. This includes everything from client response times to paperwork processing. All this data is then centralized, tracked and analyzed. To maximize performance, we decided to merge this state-of-the-art technology with a much older piece of equipment, a vending machine. We even designed it to look like a pig. A customized IT solution linked the vending machines to FedGroup's internal diagnostics. When targets aren't met, the pig remains sad and blue. But when targets are met, it turns a happy pink and automatically dispenses free chocolates to the staff. We even created specially branded packaging for the project.
Pig is a vending machine that is explicitly tied to our measurements. with no human intervention. Some of the technology challenge there to actually make this pig aware of how the admin system was performing, but we've solved that, we solved the measurements, and now every time those measurements are met, the pig opens up and everyone can go and get free food. And it's not about getting a free chocolate or whatever it is. It really is the fun, interdepartmental challenge of trying to get the pig to open up. And what's more, every time the pig does open up, he gets more greedy and it's harder to open it up the next time, which just drives the performance of the company forward.
The pig vending machine. Smart, simple, sweet.
So that is essentially taking this 20-page strategic document, linking it to 3 letters, and then starting to drive what we wanted done. And we need to realize that we didn't have the ability to open up a vending machine. We didn't have dashboards. But we made that part of what we were trying to do, and suddenly you've got an organization where you know really what's going on. But more importantly, there's no decoupling between what's happening at a strategic level, at an exco level, and what's happening in the ground. I, as CEO, right now, know what's happening in our group, right down to calls that aren't being answered or faxes that are being lost. And that's really hard in an organization where you've got 160 bank accounts just to get your cash flow. Having got the pig in place, what we found is that whilst we had the measurements, we had these dashboards, some of the interdepartmental measures became quite complex in terms of what you need to do. Not everyone is good at reading graphs. And whilst we had a measure of how the company is doing by this opening, we wanted to start to gamify, and so this is what we did next.
This is not gamification. This is gamification.
Huh?
So essentially we built a virtual world where every important measurement we're doing is put into a gamified environment. Even things like the system being down are gamified. If the connection is lost, this happens. To make people aware that there's an IT team behind the scenes trying to fix it. We also have, I think this is the canteen. We want to remind people that you must take some time out every single day. Just spend that time. And it just reminds people to go and do these things. So these in-game animations, just to almost help people recognize what needs to happen. We've included, canteen's long, it kind of feels like real life. We've even included payday. And every single payday, this animation plays a couple of times through the day to remind people that HR was there making sure your payment rocked up. It wasn't just a magical process. And so we've got these in-game events that we trigger as certain things happen, everything from payday to lunch to sales numbers to we should be going home. You don't want teams that work there 16 hours a day every single day. I've got no problem my dev teams working there for 2 or 3 days. I'll feed them pizza for 2 or 3 days in a row, no problem. But you cannot carry on doing that. If you're carrying on doing that, you don't have enough staff, you don't have the right resources. So we gamified our entire environment, and ultimately, every single environment is represented by a new virtual world, everything from farming to fishing, you name it. So if you look at the real game, this is what it kind of looks like. People's names come to the front. Their performance is shown as a team, and that team ties into As You Write. So when you open up the As You Write screen, you will see that number. The dashboards will speak to that number as well, and what needs to get done will actually be itemized on what you can do and what your team needs to get done. We largely work in a pull system rather than a push system for work. So when, much like a telephone rings, you take the call. Same with work items. People pull the work off the queue, and you can literally see the different worlds and everything, how fast the sheep move and the like, everything is tied into those performance numbers. This, for example, is marketing, where they have projects that they have to do and certain work items need to get done. The system works both on autonomous measurements, so answered phone calls and the like, but also user input. So I can literally say I want a high quality marketing event and rate it. So almost those 360-degree type of things can be put into the game, and literally the game is updated. Here's an example of software. So people forget that there are developers there, and behind the scenes developers are writing the software that we use every single day. Lastly, here's an example of sales. And you can see the guys selling. The number of fish is related to activities. So obviously your sales funnel feeds into the number of fish. The size of the fish are related to the deal. And then when certain deals are done, you actually have the 3D animations alike to start celebrating successes beyond a certain size, etc. So really it's just made it very visible to the whole organization what's going on. And then literally we have built this from the ground up, so it's just, we wanted gamification, wasn't done. We went and hired a whole lot of students who were good at coding and said, write us a game, and this is what we got. And so our measurements then, you saw that measurement when we first kind of launched, you can see now it's updated. So there you'd see your Ben Care department. So from a predictable measurement point of view and involvement, it all starts to tie together. Just quickly to show you just some of the specifics on here. Here we go. So just examples. So there's the overall score. It says, listen, this department's doing really well. Here's, for example, phone calls. So you can see we got 82 phone calls, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. This is for this department. So very localized, very real time. Every 15 minutes we can see what's going on. No missed calls, and we aim for 0 missed calls. We haven't got that 5% call center type of thing. We aim for 0 calls. Asset manager instructions, new business, the number of products, the number of actual clients, the amount, how many we are awaiting document setups, how many awaits is where we got documents but no money, pending exits, etc. This is cash book. This number we're actually quite proud of. So that number there says that there's a number on our bank transactions. And if it's not on the system, it will show a number there. And the opposite is it's on your system, but not your bank accounts. On over 500 million transactions in our prior financial years, we do not have a single mismatched item, which is really, really good. And then you can see 53 here and 31 here. Debits must line up with credits. Those are control accounts. Are supposed to go down to 0. So we're out by 480,000 Rand here. We're out by 2,000 Rand. We're out by 2 cents. We know exactly what's going on. It's a totally unbatched system for anyone who's technical, so we do not run batches. If a person makes a payment, that payment will automatically go through and do its thing as long as all the conditions are met. So as a second person approved it, the system is tied into the bank, it's tied into SARS, tied into Home Affairs. So a lot of automation to just make things run really smoothly. What's more in that game, you saw that the different people walking around, those are real people. Each of those little avatars are our real staff. And their individual performance is therefore representative of that whole number. That whole number is a multiplier for, so our game has something called quests, and we set quests with strategic objectives, and that multiplier, which applies to all staff, multiplies our bonus pool every 15 minutes. So if we drop low, the bonus accrual for 15-minute increments is dropped. And so there's quite good bonus incentives to try and keep it up and running. Every month we choose an employee of the month with different methods, and then that avatar we 3D print. So this is a nice 3D print of the avatar. So you've got a custom personalized avatar showing you and how you've performed. We also have an employee of the month, also gets to drive an SLK for the month. And so this all-around involvement. So there, for example, is this current one. So it just goes out, employee company car, congratulations, and what have you. So now that you've got the measurements, people can be involved and you know what's going on. Finally, we wanted to grow. I'm going to just share just a short little clip that just shows you some of the little growth trends, as well as one of the things we want to do is not all just about sales, but we wanted to start to get a bit of a media presence and the like, and so hopefully that's a little bit represented in this video. This is a real graph, by the way. So there we go, 2016, and there we go. That's a real increase in our Google Analytics numbers and the like. So
now we're joined by Sheldon Fredrickson, who's the Chief Financial Officer at FedGroup, for a conversation about the trends that are shaping alternative investments.
FedGroup takes care of all the hard work on you.
This morning is David Fernando, CEO of FedGroup Live.
And finally, good morning to you and welcome to the show, Grantfield. IFM.co.za. Let's talk technology, particularly couch farmers. I'm not doing things from my car.
And really sat down with the whiteboards that we've got to disrupt this. We want to be the first to do so. And that was what we started off with, was this desire to do something disruptive. And that's what we came up with.
How big a demand do we have for solar energy in this country?
Well, the recent report that just came out is showing that there's this growth.
What we realized is that if we want to make a difference at the same time, and if we want to build something that people understand where the money's going, it's even more important.
This evening and explaining so nicely, Grantfield, CEO of FedGroup.
So if we just start to now understand Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3. The Horizon 3, we understand peer-to-peer, IoT, machine learning. These are important trends. We need to be playing in them. We need to be working in them. We understand that the regulation's changing. My license could disappear tomorrow. So how do we get something that perhaps doesn't need a license? Uber, Airbnb, and the like all have no license, and yet they've done something in the platform space that's so different. We also realize that the staid financial services market is very hard to break into. And so I'm going to show you our advert for impact farming, which was the culmination of a project where we specifically sat down and said we're going to work with all the most modern technologies. We're going to bring out a financial services product that requires no license, and we're going to break into market in a very modern way.
I'm David Hasselhoff. Obviously. Let's talk about impact farming. From FedGroup, you'll own profit-producing assets on commercial farms like beehives, solar panels, blueberry bushes. FedGroup takes care of all the hard work while you get the cash. Call it your side hustle without any of the hassle. Wait, no hassle at all? Not even the hassle?
Get the FedGroup app and start investing.
So that was a very explicit attempt to go into the market with a brand new product, and if you look at that, you're not buying a fund, you're not investing in units. It is totally unregulated on purpose, not to treat our customers worse, but to start to do things differently. So the benefits is we don't have to ask you for FICA and phase and the like, because you're coming and you're buying an asset. It means I can collect your bank details and I can sign you up as a client. And then in the future I can migrate you into the more traditional financial services world. We're showing results of 11 to 15% returns. Now, where else do you get this type of return? And lastly, in this space, just compare it to the traditional business. In the traditional business, for a similar size asset pool or client size, we would do about 200 phone calls a day, right? We'd do a similar number of emails, faxes, and the like. So 400 pieces of communication a day. In this new app world, we do somewhere between 2 to 8. 400, 2 to 8. So you can see that our cost structures in a product like this are just entirely different. And so that was impact farming. I'm going to show you one of the other videos. And what that will show is our impact product with a little bit more of the how it works behind the scenes. And I want you to be looking out for peer-to-peer. In other words, one person puts in cash and buys something, someone else has the land, someone else farms it. I want you to look for Internet of Things, the ability for an electronic device to give us measurable data that we do something with. And I want you to look for machine learning. Remember, 3 years ago we identified these technologies, and we've played in all three in this product. So in short, it really is the culmination of 3 years worth of work. We've now got a system that allows us to work real time. That system is able to take money out of bank accounts without human intervention. There's an app. We know real time what's going on. We have formed 4 other businesses under different brands. One is an IoT business where we have designed and manufactured hardware, which we manufacture out of China and powers the back end of all of this. So it's got everything, we do everything from electricity measurements to temperature to you name it. We've got another business that does machine learning, and the machine learning is on the same platform. So now what happens is as you're measuring electricity, you can pick up the trends, you can see solar panels are dirty, you can change phase correction, you name it. The point being that our projects in terms of Horizon 10 year, the Horizon 3 10 year, we know where we're trying to go. Our game has nothing to do with being able to measure our internal staff. It has everything to do with where we're trying to get in 10 years' time. But if we don't start practicing and learning the lessons internally, so the game that we've got today looks very different than the one we launched a year ago. And the stuff that the devs are working on today is learning the lessons that we just didn't know before. So our Horizon 10 is quite specific with where we want to go. We're not quite sure how to get there. But we're bootstrapping every single day, making sure that every little piece of work we do makes a difference. I think just before we close, I thought it's quite important to talk about the how. Technology meets paper, I've called it. Whilst we've got this advanced game and we've got these advanced measures and the like, we are all about paper and whiteboards and very basic specs. We hire only the best in terms of our developers. They have the flexibility to come and go as they please. My best developer spent about 6 months touring Russia and Eastern Europe last year. But he checked in his code reliably. He was available in check-ins. I'm dressed up today with a buttoned-up shirt because it felt like the right attire. But often myself and others come to work in a t-shirt, and on exceptional days, shorts and no shoes. But I largely dress as, unfortunately this space still wants us to dress a certain way. But we really want people to come there and have fun. They need to understand the why. They need to make a difference. And they need to get shit done. They can make plenty of mistakes along the way. They can't repeat mistakes. If this were my computer like that, it would get chucked out the window. Literally, that's what happens at FedGroup. If there's a repeat failing, I will literally open it up and chuck it out the window, so there's no chance of that ever happening again. So there's a zero tolerance for work not done properly. But while we're exploring and doing things, we can make lots of mistakes along the way as long as we're learning. This is kind of what our environment looks like. This is in our project room, or one of the project rooms. You can see lots of whiteboards. Here is just two of the guys working, and it might not be obvious, but this is the table. So you can see literally as we sketch things on the tables, on the windows, on the walls. This is just whiteboards. This is actually out of my office. This is on a door, so you can see a semi chaotic environment, but with a lot of order. So anyone who's done Agile before, you'll recognize some of this. So here is a project, utility management. So this is clearly what we're doing in the IoT space at the moment. We've broken it up into specific things. This project, by the way, is due for the 15th of October. There is absolutely no excuses. Guys can work 20 hours a day if they have to. We will not miss that deadline. But more than likely, if things are running properly, they'll go home normal times and be finished with plenty of extra time. The amount of wasted resource in unnecessary specs and bullshit in so many organizations is what project management for me is all about. It's just trying to clear that, get rid of the non-decision makers, literally. So most staff, it must be a very protected environment. But for people who are the nonsense causes, they must get straight out. I had one of my developers in the early days. We had a project that, or a run that used to run for about 3 days. It was very, very slow. And I asked that we try a different algorithm. As an engineer, algos, we're quite good at those. And I was told that this would be a 6-week project. I said, I don't think it is. Then I was told that it wouldn't work. I said, well, please try it. Anyway, after a lot of debates, I told him to stand up, and I sat down in his chair. I'm a bad programmer, but I can program. And I sat there as I asked him for help, just to find my way around. 3 hours in, he was starting to feel quite uncomfortable as I was still hacking away at this code. But about 10 hours later, we finished. And I stood up and I said, don't you ever tell me again that this is going to take 6 weeks when it's this type of thing. Just 3 weeks ago, I was working with a relatively junior guy who kept messing up repeatedly. And so we called him in and said, listen, I want you to understand that today there's a choice for you. You can choose to be the best you can ever be. And if you choose that, I will take you under my wing and I will develop you into the best you can be. But you're going to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. Alternatively, pick up your bags and leave. You choose. 3 days later, I got his resignation. stupid choice. When the CEO says, I will bring you, but we all have opportunities and we squander them at times. But that's the culture. It's one of work really, really hard. Not 12 hours a day every day. You've got to have work-life balance. But we work hard and we play hard and we have lots of fun. So this is just kind of showing you some of the paper. So one of these boards on here, at the top of that top board, you can see little, that's actually the guy's name who decided to leave. So it's a burning issue because he's left us in a bit of, even, you know. But anyway, but our burning issues, you can see it's any item. We've got someone who walks around the entire organization and touches every single person every single day, where any item can be brought up as a burning issue. Hits the burning issues board, it gets a deadline, which can be a day, it can be 3 months, some things are bigger. Depending on our success, every Friday, every item that's due, if it's not ticked off, will hit our game. So this over here is my small group of people's score today, an hour ago, 94. Burning issue completion is at 100, and we're at 88 for the rest of the business. That score is made up of every other department's every other issue. And so there's a person now, by the way, I can drill into it as well, but there's a person now that literally understands that 88 and exactly why and where the things are that are bringing us down. And so the bonus pool for the 15 minutes that are represented here was multiplied by a factor of 0.94 in terms of all the excos right down to the staff. And that is how we do it at FedGroup. Thank you very much.
Now, not all at once. Any questions? Here we go. Thank you.
Can I just ask a favor? Just speak out loudly so that we can catch it on the recording as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just interested. When you decide on these tools and values of the FedGroup, what factors do you look into? Because earlier you mentioned how the market and the world is changing so fast. How do you decide on them, and how do they remain relevant to the changes throughout? Or is there ever a time when you have to re-look into them and say, okay, maybe we need to readjust the peak or change the peak with the bull? So how do you decide on them?
Sure. So it was the tools and what else? And values. Got it. So the values are 30 years old. We've been an organization with 30 years old next year. The change over the last 3 years is that as we've grown, and we've grown really quickly, we've had to instill our values, especially on newcomers. So to almost as quickly as possible say, fit in or don't. So that's on the values. So I think the values are fairly timeless. With regards to the trends, I think that trends move relatively slowly. So what are the trends today? Let's look at technology trends. Some of them are hard to tell whether they're going to make it or not. But if you look at IoT, Internet of Things, how long has that been around? 30 years, 40 years? A tracker, I mean, we've been running trackers in our cars the last 15 years. That's IoT. We've been running house alarms in our houses. We've been running, if you're a mining company, you've been running really complex mining equipment connecting your business. Most of the modern buildings have got big building management systems. The trend is that it's getting cheaper, that you can do it without being hardwired because you've got an internet and connectivity, and you've got batteries and electronics that can run on batteries. So certainly one of the pieces of tech that we've built is a small little circuit board like this. It will run 2 to 5 years on a battery, measuring temperature or pulses or whatever you want to do with it. So the trend there is that IoT's been there for a long time. 3 years ago, we've said we need to get a competency there. Machine learning, if one goes back to that little paperclip, Microsoft's little paperclip and the like, there are technologies that come out that are not good enough yet. I'm sure in the past you tried talking to your phone and it just didn't work. To the point where a lot of the people in our generation are uncomfortable talking to their phone because we're not used to it working. But my kids talk to it all the time. They just know that works. So machine learning, in some or other fashions, also quite a way off. It has been running for quite some time. But processing power and the commoditization of processing power is what's making this really attractive right now. I can run a massive server for 30 seconds and pay for just that usage. So that's that second sort of trend that I believe has been there for a while. The third one is peer-to-peer. That is something that, again, has been around for quite some time. Financial services actually is peer-to-peer. A person comes along who doesn't know anyone, puts money into a trusted platform that lends it to someone else. It's peer-to-peer. But the incumbents have created rules and regulations around them to protect themselves and overcharge for fees. So that the change here is not so much a technology, it is the price bracket at which you do things. So at the moment, when I put 100 Rand with a bank, they charge me 100 Rand a month. Although because I like the slow round, it's 450 Rand a month. If you buy a blueberry on our app, it costs you 300 Rand to invest with us, and we charge you nothing. Because I lend your money, well, we buy an asset, and it produces results, and we pay the farmer out of the results, and we pay the landowner out of the results. I take a profit, and I give you your money back. And there's plenty of fat in it. And that's the change. So those are three technologies. We've got views on a few others as well. So, I mean, I'm just keeping it relatively simple. I'm no political expert. So, for example, we deal with political guys and we say, what's happening? It used to be Clem Santa, now it's Daniel Silk and the like. You need to read and try and understand those trends. There's clearly an environmental trend happening. I mean, my daughter, I can't even use a straw. I'm like, quickly, you can't use straws anymore, you can't use plastic anymore, which is a good thing, by the way. But the point being that it's a trend that is happening. And by the way, these things always, my view is they start young and they bubble up. So go and look what your kids are doing. Go and ask them what they're learning at school. And they will get older, but more than that, the technology and the changes will catch up. Which of your parents use a cell phone? All of them. Which your parents, when they came out, said they would use a cell phone? None of them. Which your parents use iPads? All of them. All right, etc., etc. So those price points are coming down, and that's the changes. So if you look at impact, we've tried to use the technology changes, but it's not called impact by mistake. We're trying to, in every one of those products, they must make a difference to people, planet, and profit. Even blueberries. It has to use smart water. So we use 10% of what it used to in terms of the water usage and the like. And we've got plans on what we want to do in that space in the future. But the final part to that answer is the exciting part then is not the individual technologies or the individual changes. It is always a convergence. So the IoT gives the data the machine learning needs. The peer-to-peer brings it all together. You use all of that to bring an impact product because of the environmental change. The politics and the regulations getting too heavy, so you just bypass it totally. So I believe in trying to understand those trends. That's why the 10-year view. Where are we going in 10 years? What's that kind of looking like? And Elon Musk for me is the perfect example. He wants to go to Mars. Do you think he knows exactly how he's going to get there? Not a chance. But he knows he needs to. He knows he needs to be able to dig big tunnels and get around. So just get that running. He knows he needs rechargeable batteries. He knows he needs solar panels. They're just side projects. Our game is not. Yeah, so what is a game? But we know where we want that for. And if you go through the various things we're working on, they have nothing to do with today's business. They're all where we want to be. And there's a whole lot of things that we know today that we didn't know a year ago and so on. And that's largely the way in which we run it.
Thank you. I've got two questions. The first question is, why did you decide to go in-house? Because you said everything was in-house. So what might you share with that? And then how did you recruit the skill? Because it takes a lot of skill and expertise.
Yeah. The reason to go in-house was we were a small financial services company. What we found was that the systems that were out there were controlled by the big players. So if I came along, I'd pay license fees for features that we most often didn't need. Any requests that we had were always put on a back burner and never got to, so I never had a competitive advantage. There's an obsession with some crap systems, SAP and the like. I mean, I just think, in our space, I think that SAP does have a place, but I just don't get it. I just don't get it, and I'll have a debate. I'm lucky that I understand the technology really, really well in terms of those sort of things. And then I think that the last part is that a lot of the good systems are offshore based, so you end up with license fees that ultimately kill your model. The negative going in-house is that unless you can scale, you never pay it. The way in which we have scaled, we've done it slightly differently in that we don't have the ability to scale as quickly as some of the other players. So we've scaled sideways. So if you look at every one of my products, they look the same in terms of the way in which we've built our technology. So our real trick, it took us 2 years, is we've mapped out the similarity between a will, an IoT device, a group risk policy, you name it. If you go and ask any of my main devs, how does it get done in the system, they'll have the same answer because everyone understands what we call our triangle. We've built this almost language of our own in terms of how we do it. The recruitment, I never have enough devs. We always have vacancies and always looking. We, in the pure dev space, have not had a single person leave us since I've taken over as CEO, not one. So a lot has got to do with culture. We hire we hire guys who are very, very smart. We're comfortable talking their language because the better the guy is, the harder it is to cross the divide, so to speak. But we're very comfortable. We hire a lot of engineers who talk a common language. So head of ops, head of projects, head of dev, they're all engineers. They all talk a common language. A lot of our devs have got multi-skills, so they'll be commerce plus engineering, or so I can literally go and write it. We've never written a spec. We have never written a spec. The most you'll see is those pink notes and a few supporting notes. So yeah, hiring is hard, but we watch it carefully. It's a small team, by the way. The team, this entire system started dev with 2 guys. It's grown to 8 people. All of this work is 100% in-house built, including the gamification, the actual firmware on the IoT devices. Our entire team is 8 people, which shows what you can do with very focused development, yeah. But 14 years, but still, yeah.
Grant, just your challenges in terms of managing your stakeholders and your shareholders
Yeah.
In terms of the last 3 years, what would you say? How did you get into that growth managing your?
Yeah. So it's a family business. So I was second generation. At the time of takeover, I'm one of 4 brothers. So there was at least one other brother in the race, along with another external. So it wasn't just the handover. There was a little bit of a negotiation around the second generation, recognizing that being king of all is not necessarily as important as having good stakeholder relations and keeping those intact. We are very blunt, like the conversation that SQL guy is the type of conversation we have everywhere. There's no mincing of words. It's not rude. It's just very direct. We enlisted external help that helped us create very specific boundaries between the stakeholder hats. So when we go for family dinner, you're not allowed to talk work at all. It is out of bounds. We have shareholder meetings with AGMs. We have our board is independent, so I'm a member of the board, but it's not a family board. It's a proper board. I butt heads quite a bit with the board because they like a risk-based approach. I do too, but it's just on different sides of the risk fence. Yeah. So they like to remove the risk. My view is that the removal of risk is what's ultimately going to close down many of these businesses and actually results in failures. So I believe in very progressive but managed risk. So, you don't just roll out a new transaction system, not care about it. But the quicker you get that out, the smaller the code change. You watch it carefully before it does its things. Trying to think, we've got everything from a family mantra type, like what we stand for, and but quite formalized. I suppose that's the answer. Is quite formalized structures in a fairly chaotic once you implement it. So, like kind of a big box, but it's a very, very definite box in which we operate.
Right. I just want to ask, you're obviously very passionate in what you do and your IT and all that. Now the business itself has spanned various generations. How, with your new movement, have you been able to cope with your older clientele and their adoption of that?
Yeah, so I did an event, 3-4 months ago. I was dressed actually exactly like this, except not pink. It was a white shirt. And I had a formal complaint from one of my Afrikaans conservative brokers about my dress. So we recognize that trying to get that who asked the question? I've lost you in the audience. There we go, found you again. We recognize that you are playing, you are going to marginalize some people. But by and large, we found that the adoption has been very well received. So you'll see our logo has changed. Now the logo has changed from our double F, quite old-fashioned and staid, to a block. The block, by the way, it looks so simple, but it allows us to go on a black or a white background easily. It works in web apps straight away. You can cut out the centers and work with just the centers. You can cut out the background. So a lot of thinking goes into these sort of things. And our broader story is largely aimed at our brokers because our traditional products have been sold through broker networks. So we launch an app that allows for no brokers. You cannot, it's direct only. So we go to our brokers, and this is true, by the way, we're not pulling the wool over anyone's eyes. This is our exact where we're going. We believe that brokers, in their current format, cannot last. And the example is that if a guy comes and buys a 300 Rand blueberry bush, which he does, I've had 10,000 of those guys over the last 6 months, and I pay you 10% commission, which I can't afford. By the way, on that product, my margin is anywhere between 1% and 4% per annum. So on a 300 Rand product, I'm making a 3 Rand margin, not profit. Right. So now the broker, even if he wants 50% of my margin, I pay him 1.50 Rand per annum, he's not going to be happy. But if he doesn't change to this type of thinking, he is dead. So the way in which we've done is we've met with our key stakeholders and then we've told them where we're going in 10 years' time. And it's a model that absolutely embraces our broker network. Absolutely. But it does so in a way that doesn't look like the environment today. And that's largely how we've navigated that space. And our app, by the way, you'll see will change. And it's quite interesting. If you took snapshots of our app every 6 months, you would have seen a very simple, very easy to use app when we launched it. That was on purpose. And then you get like questions. One guy phones and says, "Oh, but," typically the engineer, you know. So now you add, and our app went and did this. And now what we've done is we've gone and we've hacked it right down again. So you go and it's nice and simple, but it answers all that complexity and clever. Just sometimes an iPad, for me, is the perfect, before Tim Cook got hold of it. But an iPad, when Steve Jobs ran it, was the most elegant experience. No training needed, no swipe up to learn something. It just worked. You just picked it up and it just naturally worked. That for us is what an app should be. Getting that right is so difficult. And that's what we're trying to do. So the reason we don't have our entire product range in our app was because we can't even get it right with 3 products. So we're not trying that yet. We've gone through about 30 minor versions. I mean, whether you like it or not, if you're on our app, everything is tracked. Everything. Where your finger, you name it. But that's like that with every app. So don't worry. If you use a phone, get used to it. But a lot of companies don't use that insight. You need to go back and you read it and you need to understand it and use it. So our app, we are building for what we want in 10 years' time. Whether we'll have cell phones, I don't know. So here's another good example. We've got 2 apps, actually. One that is the FedGroup app and one which is called FedGroup Forms. FedGroup Forms is used for all our farmers and brokers and any behind-the-scenes type of guys that fill in data. Our interface into our system, whether it comes from an app, right? Or whether it comes from an IoT device, or whether we go and pull satellite data to overlay to see what's going on, runs through a common interface. So whether that IoT device gets chucked out or something new, this is the space we're learning. The only reason we went the hardware was because the hardware was 10 times more expensive. So we flew to China, and we very quickly, with Google Translate, but we literally, in the course of 2 weeks, dropped our best price that we could get anywhere, either locally or China, but by putting feet in the ground and willing to put the hard yards in, we dropped it to 10% of our original cost. And the quality it's phenomenal. So that's our lessons. It's just trying. I hope we don't have to look after the hardware. I'm hoping that someone comes out with something cheaper. I'm talking to a company out of Taiwan at the moment who look like they may be able to do it even better. Then we'll check out our hardware layer. We want the data. Yeah.
Grant, of your 3 projects that we've made mention of, was there ever a moment where you had to mitigate the risks? And what were the risks all about? 1. 2. Was there ever any inaccuracy in terms of your scope management and your costs?
Well, yes, the second one. But I'll go into it. So our game is always around trying to identify and mitigate, to identify, understand, and mitigate risk. I think that what makes us a bit different is our view on risk. So and actually it's around culture. If I'm in, here's a good example. The worst mistake anyone ever made in our organization is in a piece of code, one line of code was wrong, and for a whole lot of quite complex but not negligent reasons, our system pulled 100 million rand out of the market overnight by mistake. So this guy that was responsible for the code, it escalates very quickly. Now the approach I can have is go and shit all over you and like, this is absolute, this can't happen, this is right. But it was a expensive but honest mistake. So we looked at markets were down. We were down about, I'm trying to think what the amount was. It was 100 million. We were down about 3.5 million rand on that day. Right, so it was about a 3.5 million rand cash mistake. We just double acquitted it. We decided we're waiting one more day. The worst can be is, so remember we've got the buffers to do this. We're not playing with people's money. Right? I mean, if it was out by 20 million rand, we've got the balance sheet to just put in 20 million rand. So we waited a second day because we took an educated guess of what would happen if markets. The markets happened to have come off, a bit of a sensational story. We made 130,000 rand on that bet, which was good in the end. But you can see that it's around blame and blame culture and the like. The guy did, if we came down on that guy, one of my best examples is one day in my office I get a letter and I look at this letter and it's 3 weeks old. It's taken 3 weeks to go from reception. We're the shortest building in Sandton with 3 stories. I mean, it's like a week a story. 3 weeks later, I get this letter. Again, what's the approach you can take? You can go there and you can literally say, this is unacceptable. Why did it happen? We go to root cause every time. Why did this happen? So why did this cord go wrong? I can tell you why it went wrong, because some guys used sticky tape in here to fix this before. That's why. So this has happened before. So in my organization, if I found sticky tape, absolutely, a guy will get his ass kicked so far. But largely speaking, guys are trying to do their best job. The letter, in this case, as our organization had grown, the box that it comes into, the arrival box, had gotten too small. So it had fallen behind. When they cleaned 3 weeks later, they found it. So the fixes get a bigger box and there we go, the problem's gone. So it's about how you deal with that risk and manage it. Scope creep, cost creeps and the like. Yes. It's almost the only benefit is that if you're running with a very close real-time loop of what's going on, you can choose what levers do you want to reduce scope or do you want to spend more and make those choices almost real time. So it's why I don't like budgets. I do budgets for the board, but so much is out of your control. So you sit there playing around with your 100,000 rand lever, but a politician stands up and bang you down by 900,000 rand. So now you need to keep a pretend kitty, just, the way in which people sandbag sales numbers, the way in which people have little private reserves and the like. So for me, it's about real-time accurate information. We generate the board packs, which are your financials, which are 3 months old, gives you a nice historical. It is important. It's audited, it's checked, it gives you cause for reflection, time out to think. I'm not poo-pooing that and saying that's not important. But our board at the same time log into real-time stuff and they see what's going on. And that tight feedback loop helps with the inevitable impossibility of trying to control scope creep, as I see it. Otherwise, it takes you 6 months to write a spec and then it's old. Yeah. So I really like the agile methodology. It doesn't fix everything. It has its own set of problems, but yeah. I don't like computers for project management. If you're trying to do a nuclear power station, go for it, of course. if you develop. But for most of our projects and the level that we're at, as CEO of a business which has got a number of businesses, I don't need MS Project. You just don't need it. You just need pen and paper and work out some stuff, because where's that picture here? If you saw it here, I don't know if it's visible on. Yeah, so these are blocks. These are blocks. It's just so obvious to see. That's what's required. We're doing a utility management project. We know, without even being written down here, 15th of October, that's when we're delivering on this project. We know it. Here's the main steps. Without even writing it down here, we know who's responsible. What's the problem? Oh, okay, big decision. Fine, okay. I'm aware. We just walk, and there's lots of these things. By the way, we do replicate this onto Trello. So if anyone's used Trello, it's a great tool. You can just sort of create almost different ways of viewing data. But on Trello, we put this on there so that you can at night almost see a digital version of this. But Trello is our viewing tool rather than our working tool. For me, this is far better. Pen, paper, pull it around, push it around. Yeah.
Questions? I've got a big question. So we're here in the Free State. It's agriculture all around us, and we're in the process of rectifying the country's mistakes it's made under the previous regime, etc. There's a land issue. We end up with up-and-coming farmers who are put in a position to farm commercially and successful, and we expect them to grow and develop, but they don't have this. Even the agribusinesses in the environment who sort of take them under their wing, they struggle to mentor them properly. Yeah. They're reliant on the goodwill of a neighbor, for instance, to guide them technically or in terms of the management of the farm, etc. We work closely with Grain SA, who runs a program similar. Organized agriculture are trying to figure this out. And we ran a leadership program in the agricultural space. We integrate some of these messy problems that the government sit with, and how leaders in agriculture can start dealing with it. And one of the groups actually came up with behavioral economics as a solution to assisting those up-and-coming farmers. So you didn't sign a non-declaration anything.
I might be reading the same books. Yeah. So behavioral economics is ultimately so. It's obvious. It's what it's about. We know that people are predictably irrational, right? That's about the only thing. Which is why to sit here and try and work out these specifics, you can't work out. I don't even know what I know that when that video came up with the gamification, I looked at my stomach. I thought, yes, I've got to lose that stomach. It's very easy. Exercise more, eat less, right? An hour before I come here, I'm like, oh, Spur, let's go have a look. I'm not even hungry. I'm like, oh, I've eaten too much again. Why the hell did I do that? We are the most bizarre creatures. So now I can't even know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Now I try and look at someone else, right? Then I go across the race or cultural or whatever boundary, and I pretend to try and I have no idea. So I believe that it boils down to trust. Once you get that trust relationship going. So by the way, Eteke, where that started was a guy that I knew used to live in Diepsloot, and two of his friends. So the three of them came along to me. They were in grade 10, and they asked, please can I have some work? So I said, yeah, okay, I suppose. So but bring me your reports. They were about midway through grade 10. My reports. So I said, yeah, bring me your reports. So they said, no, it's not. I said, bring it. Anyway, the reports were dismal. And so I said to them, listen, guys, I will give you work now, but if you don't get your marks up, you'll never work for me again. But if you get your marks up, I'll guarantee you work until matric, every VAC work, what have you. Through this process, became very good friends with a guy named Brinny, out of Diepsloot. Long story short, he got his marks up. He finished his matric. He came and worked in what then became the Eteke program. So he was not through that program. But that was what was the why we did it. It was like, oh gee, Brinny, this is so cool. This is good. And then from there, he went and he worked for someone else, and then he went and he started his own business, and anyway, he's got his own construction business and employs about 40 people now, and But in this whole process was the first time I was able to, as a white male, have a voice to a black male and understand complex issues, which no one's allowed to have those honest conversations. Either way, especially as a white male. As a white male, it's really difficult to have honest conversations. But in so doing, I became really good friends with a black male out of an underprivileged environment compared to my privileged environment, etc., etc. And so the first time we start to understand this. Now you work into the government situation at the moment, and you take a previously advantaged farmer with and I'm going to, please no offense, a white monopoly capital bank, and all these complex words and phrases flying around, and you expect it to somehow magically come together. I actually got a phone call. I know I'm going to be get into trouble for name dropping here, but Khelema Motlanthe, for those who don't know who he is, he was the on a Sunday evening a couple of months ago, I got a phone call from his office and went to go and visit him, and long story short, to talk exactly about this matter, because it is one of the symptoms of what's happening around the whole country. If you look at the white guy who's got his farm with his ABSA bank account, he doesn't actually own that farm. Right, ABSA owns that farm, and that guy might be very wealthy, but he doesn't actually own that farm. Now you take a new farmer who wants to come on board. He's got no money. He goes to that same bank and asks for money, and they say, well, you've got no experience, and you've got no way of moving forward. He doesn't have a land. It just becomes a real mess. That was why Khelema Motlanthe came to speak to us about impact, because impact allows you to go and have a landowner who's separate from a farmer, who's separate from the assets. And we're busy in the North West province actually piloting some of the stuff with government to see if we can do it, because it'll be a different funding model around this space. But given that there's a wide audience, our problem now is how do we scale this? We've got the tech, we are scaling it as quick as we can, but ultimately we need, like myself and Brinny, who trust each other empirically, or whatever that word is. We need groups of people who bring different parts to the equation, who trust each other, to really just start to make this thing fly. Probably the biggest lesson I learned in agriculture is I plant my blueberry tree and I get my little bee box going, and I farm this thing. My yields will be 10% what a commercial farmer is doing, because it's no longer farming by touch and feel. It is so advanced. It's no longer making sure it's watered and what have you. The composition on an hourly basis on some of these things is important to understand the yields. You're actively splitting the bush to make sure you're doubling your yields, etc. So all the stuff I learned on can you believe it, a 3-day blueberry conference. They talk about blueberries for 3 days, right? And only begin to touch the science behind it. I believe ideas are good luck to anyone who can do things. Execution's king. What we're trying to do in the impact space, peer-to-peer, to split land and farmers from capital. IoT, to give cheap measurements back on some of the important drivers. Mobile apps, so the other app, to take everything that cell phones can do, think of it, photos, geolocation, all that data we're pushing into a central type of space. Machine learning, we then start to augment a farmer's capability. So now you could take a new farmer, not to remove his expertise, he may be very good, but the best agronomist in Australia on macadamia nuts, our machine learning hopefully would be able to go and say, you need to get this guy in to ask this question. So we want to use machine learning to understand preemptively when things are going wrong, to increase yields and productivity, thus making our product more attractive to capital, to put the capital in. That's largely what we're trying to do in that space.
I can only imagine creating a farm as a microcosm of your existing system so that farmer has a dashboard and again see where he's going, include environmental factors. No, it's excellent. Last thoughts, anyone? Are you also blown away? Does my hair do this? So that's what I'm trying to say is this. Thank you so much for sharing the world that you live in and so successfully just bringing it back to the basics of how do I plan? How do I organize and how do I constantly deal with complexity and change, yet keeping my eye on the ball, making sure like those, I've never figured out what birds it is that fly in a V form, making sure that everybody aligns behind where you're going.
I mean, maybe one bit of final thoughts is, I got back last week from Mozambique. I take a lot of time out because while you're working in the business, you can never work on the business. And project management for me is working on the business, largely speaking. And if you arrive at work and you open up your email, what direction do you think your day takes? So you need to not arrive at work. So driving here, come and doing a talk, it's time out. You know how much thinking that allows you to do on your own business. People should spend a lot less hours in the office. A lot less hours in office. And just focus on their business. But you not just go and lie. You need to, go and concentrate and make it work. But yeah. Anyway, that's yeah. Thank you.